Hello and good afternoon. My name is Julie Mohr, and I'm the president of Mind the IT Gap. And I have with me here today Mark. Mark, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mark Galligan. I'm the Senior Director of IT Service Management for First American.
Welcome, Mark, and welcome to all of you. Our topic today is about the service desk and really about the idea of how if we can more successfully kind of create the storefront for the service desk, that we'll get back to doing the things that are meaningful for the service desk to be focused on. So today, our topic will cover looking at the service market space. What do we mean by open for business? Talking a little bit about being more passionate about the service desk services that we provide. We have some practical advice from Mark around how to get your IT storefront running, and then we have some best practice advice from me. I'm going to bring kind of that consultative view into today's topic. And we would like it throughout the presentation, if you guys do have questions or comments, things that you would like to share with us, please do by all means submit a question. And when we get to the end of the presentation today, we would very much like to have you share your experiences, and we'll work through those questions together as a group. So first of all, I'd like Mark to introduce himself and tell us a little bit more about his career and his professional background.
All right. Well, just before we started, I think I was confessing that I do have a mainframe background. That's where I come from. So if you ever had an opportunity to see my picture, you'd see that my gray hairs are real. And back then, I kind of started off, and it was a very, very command-oriented and control-oriented environment. And so I had to evolve over the last 25 years in IT Service Manager, becoming more of a customer service-oriented approach to how we deliver IT services. Part of that is you realize if you can make things easy for people to do, it, number one, allows them to do what they need to do much more simply without a lot of headache and hassle, but it also frees you up to do some other things, the things that you need to do. So that was kind of where I started in doing that in a mainframe environment. And when I was asked to build a help desk, I got kind of involved in that approach, or in building in a help desk, and kind of, again, more customer service, learned a lot about it, made a lot of mistakes, and have tried to, learn from those mistakes. And so today I'm running my third one, building my third one, and it mostly is, at least initially, centered around an IT storefront, so we can enable self-service and help people get the things and items and services they need in a simple manner.
Well, excellent. Great to have you here today, Mark. And just so you know, I have the same gray hair, but I take care of that. Mine may be gray, but you can't tell that it's gray. Hello, my name is Julie Mohr, and I've been an IT service management consultant since back in 1999 is when I went out and hung up my single shingle. But I have very much enjoyed a career throughout service operations, and in particular have done, starting off not on mainframes, but definitely doing customer support and a little bit of data center work, working my way through LAN administrator, systems analyst. I did some programming in there at one point, and then became a director of an outsourced service desk. So you can't get more complex than an outsourced environment where you're providing services for multiple different customers. So I think on this call today here, you have a ton of experience around establishing a service desk and what it takes to be successful. So really, when we think about today's market space, and this is true across the board, I mean, when you look at the way that customers are using services today, we are becoming, or customers, I put we into that because I know as a customer, I know that I am more demanding. I have more diverse needs and higher expectations as a consumer of services today than I did in the past, and I don't think that our customers are any different than that. We have multiple devices, multiple service providers in our lives, so when we come into the work environment, we have very high expectations on the services that we're going to get from our internal IT organization, and when our organization fails to meet those expectations, we can be very vocal critics of the lack of service. So from your perspective, Mark, does that kind of sound familiar to you?
Oh, absolutely. And I really like the point you make about how how this has become, we all experience it today. Nowadays, everybody has, as you feel, an IT service experience by going when they go to an Apple store or a Best Buy or some other retailer of technology, and then often through purchasing things via some sort of service like iTunes or Amazon or Netflix or things like that. So everybody is used to, if you will, a high degree nowadays of customer service in IT, if you will, transactions. And I think one of the challenges we've had in the corporate IT world is before we used to be kind of, if you will, the masters of the secret technology, and nowadays, everybody does this. It's no longer a specialized field, if you will. It's really become a commodity. And although I think in the IT, in the corporate IT infrastructure business, you hear they use the buzz term, I think, consumerization of IT. I really think it's kind of the consumerization of IT operations. And it's important, I think, at this time that we recognize that our customers experience great IT service outside our organizations, and we have to find a way to provide that. And frankly, in tough times. I don't think I'm unique. I'm looking at my slide here, right? And you talk about cutbacks, and I think over the last 4 to 5 years, there's been a number of staff reductions, either through unfortunate layoffs or the inability to fill an open position. I think there's been a lot of pressure to simultaneously reduce your costs while improve the quality of the services you're offering. You've had to deal with obsolete, and I use the word Byzantine systems in terms of how we delivered things. Everything was, if you will, buried in silos, and only a select few or a select individual was allowed to know how to do a certain thing. And you want to move it forward, but you have all that baggage to bring with you. At the same time, the very same people you're servicing are going out and getting tremendous customer experiences outside the work environment. What do you think, Julie?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. What about the mixture of incidents to requests?
Well, I have this slide here. It goes again in my 3 service desk or help desk deployments. This number or this ratio keeps coming back to me. Basically I've noticed that 60% of the work we've always done have been fulfillment type activities. I think in the ITIL dialogue they call it a service request, and about 40% of them are incidents. And so it's kind of been, if you will, a reoccurring pattern. And for those of you who are under 50, I apologize for the vague 70s cultural reference there, but it keeps coming back. It's 6 to 4, or I guess it'd be 3 to 2. Is you constantly you're trying to do some sort of you're spending your time doing fulfilling things rather than fixing things. And if you could find a way to deal with that fulfillment aspect of it, you could spend a lot more of your time on working on people who have real issues, trying to do their job or get business through. So, Julie, has that been your experience?
I think it might even be lower in today's environment, mostly because we haven't done a very good job of internally documenting that stuff that is planned. I think if we did a better job of doing that, we would have invited our customers a long time ago to begin using that self-service level within the IT organization. But right now, it's too easy for our customers to go somewhere else for a lot of that planned work. So, I mean, I'm as guilty of this as anybody else. If I'm having an issue with something on a website or something, I'll go to Google before I call anybody anymore, because I'm able to get a much faster response. And in many situations, within a few clicks, I get an answer to a question that allows me to continue working. So when you look at this 60-40 split, I think if we're just dealing with what we measure coming in, I think our customers are going for a lot of stuff outside of the IT organization that we don't track. So it has the potential for being even higher than 60% of it being planned and 40% unplanned.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, and I think you're right on there. And so my approach, what we're doing here at First American, what I've done in the past is trying to find a way where we can get that fulfillment work, the things that you can plan. If we can, if you will, automate that workflow, not simply by putting up a portal and letting somebody have a request, but literally build, if you will, a storefront with workflow behind it. You can, literally give people a familiar. I'm trying to find another word than shopping experience, but a familiar, shopping experience that lets them order the items and the services they need. And nowadays, it's very similar to what they're accustomed to. I think many of us on the call today are commonly, may buy a song from iTunes or a book from Amazon or order goods and services from both online and brick and mortar retail establishments, every day. As a matter of fact, I think we have an economy built on it. So people know how to do this, and they're nowadays, like I said before, they're pretty sophisticated and they have a high expectation for customer service. And nowadays, that they can benchmark that experience to what they get at work, I think it provides a real challenge for us, and it's in the corporate IT world, and we have a real challenge ahead of us to try and figure out how do we keep up and deliver our services in a reliable and predictable manner. So, Julie, am I close?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that organizations struggle with is what do we put into the scope of that storefront? Because the potential is for us to put much more there than what our customers will actually use. So I've got this slide up here to kind of talk a little bit about where you find appropriate stuff to migrate from, potentially from the back-end processes and stuff that we're used to fulfilling the customers with to your storefront portal, that open kind of open store, open front face of IT to your consumers. So the typical stuff that we think about is from a request perspective, right? We have, I need to change my password. I need to download Visio. There's all these common things that we know are user-facing that we've been managing in the incident management process, kind of as time allows, let's fulfill these requests and get them done in a timely manner and provide the outcome to the customers. So that's our first kind of our most likely scope of where we're going to draw a lot of the storefront stuff from. And from an ITIL perspective, this is often, you'll hear the term thrown around, an actionable service catalog, because the catalog really represents the front page of the IT organization showing all the services that are provided, with the ability to click on a link and get access to that service, download software, whatever it is. That's kind of that front-facing portion of what IT provides. And yet, behind the scenes, there are a lot of things that we also manage in the change management process that may be likely candidates for moving from change management over to request fulfillment, and thus improving change management's ability to get through all of the volume of changes that are going through that process. And kind of the criteria that we look for within change management is, first of all, does it have a change model? Has it been predefined? Do we have that workflow that you're talking about, so that we have a consistent way that can manage the risk, whatever risk there is involved in that? Is it low risk, high frequency, so it's happening a lot and it's user-facing? And if that's the case, we should be able to pull that chunk of change out of the change management process and migrate it over to that storefront as well. So we have all these service requests that we've been typically handling within the incident management process, combined with whatever we can find out of the change management process, and that really becomes the bulk of what our scope is, what we would offer at that storefront. Now, this is a graphic that I use in one of my courses that I teach to help people to understand, is it something that we would handle in request fulfillment or as an RFC? And the key thing is that changes really do represent risk that has to be managed. So moving a computer from one location to another, can a user request it? Absolutely. Is the risk high, medium, or low? Generally, it's low. Does it happen a lot? Yeah, probably. Then it would be great if we can say yes, yes, yes. That'd be a great thing to bring into the request fulfillment process and be able to migrate that to that storefront that Mark is referring to. But when you start getting into things like requesting secure access to a building, notice just by putting secure access, we have now introduced additional risk. It doesn't mean that we can't still handle this in the request fulfillment process. It just means that we have to be able to manage that risk to everyone's liking, and then we could put something like that also in request fulfillment. So as much as we possibly can, out of change management, out of incident management, bringing it to the storefront, and as Mark suggested, building up this self-service portal that's meaningful, that gives customers the ability to not just get access to services that we provide, but in many situations doing that without having to actually talk to someone and be able to self-serve. So what about your experience with establishing scope and the cultural change that's required?
Well, it's kind of been interesting, and again, the comic I've always admired this particular comic because we have the kid on trying to get into the School of the Gifted, and he's pushing on a door that clearly says pull. But eventually, at least I've always thought that if that kid was persistent enough, he gets in. And that's kind of, I think, what you're going to be up against when you start these things. Number one, you are going to have to work with people who have worked in a fairly protected or siloed environment sometimes. And while they are maybe very good and proficient in terms of what they do, they may not have any sort of insight about how the work gets to them or what happens to it after they hand off. And they're really not aware that they are, if you will, part of a supply chain. So the idea of first off, bridging that, getting that, if you will, embedded, and knowing that they work with, if you will, sometimes the others, and the others will have to work with them to help, if you will, document the process in terms of how we do it. And then conversely, on the other side, going out to your customer base, your consumer, who you're trying to make things easy for, who may be professing some degree of pain today, may be more afraid of the change than the pain they're currently experiencing. And so, I wrote down here, you have to be passionate about your undertaking, and you do, because it is not an easy thing to do. You have to deal with a lot of different, if you will, mindsets, both in the internal organization and then in the customer base you serve. And they all have opinions. A lot of them are valid. And a lot of them are based upon prior experience, right? And probably most of them. The other thing is, you can sit there, you look at kind of how an organization got to where it is. It was successful in doing so. So there's you're really pushing up, if you will, against the door, or up against a wall sometimes to sit there and to help move people into a new way of not just delivering the service, but then frankly also consuming it. Basically, you're kind of changing your culture a little bit, and that is, technology is easy, culture is hard. And I think the things I want to focus on is, well, how do I just make it easy for my customer? Because at the end of the day, First American is not an IT company. We are a title and a title insurance company, and that's where our company wants to, that's how we make money, and that's where we want to invest our resources. So if you can find a way to, what I want to do is I want to, if you will, get out of their way and just make it easy for them to get the IT items and services that they need. And, changing that behavior is challenging. But eventually, if you're persistent, you eventually win them over because they see that, number one, it is easier, it is convenient, and it is less painful. And then number two, you also have to work at reducing your internal complexity, right? Sometimes when you map things out, which is a challenge in itself, you're going to find, you're going to have to convince people that this is worth doing. And then show them what's in it for them, the value of it for them, and then reinforce them that what they're really providing here is a service, and how the consumer values that service, not necessarily how they value it internally or how they think their boss does. Right? What's really important, and that the importance is the value to the customer.
Yeah,
Close, Julie?
Yeah, you mentioned something really important about culture, and again, as our society has moved more towards self-service, I mean, I don't have a service provider today that hasn't begun pushing me towards self-service, making it more difficult for me to get to a live person on the phone, making it easier for me to find what I need to do through a website. I mean, if I look at my Comcast experience, right, I can check the uptime or the availability of my network and my phone service or my cable service by going in and logging into the website. Now they have this feature where they go and they test, and they're able to determine whether or not things are working in your area. So, I mean, the things that we commonly used to call in about, we don't have to anymore. Now, I can't say that all users are eager to adopt self-service. And so I was wondering if you might make a comment on how you win your customers back. I mean, because if many of them who are candidates for self-service who have probably found other ways to get the answers that they need, how do you get them back to begin coming to your storefront, so to speak?
Well, first off, very, very valid point. Right now in the IT world, where I work today, at least in terms of most the commodity IT items and IT services, we're still, if you will, we use the word customer because we're trying to achieve a goal, but they're kind of a captive audience. I think more appropriately what we're trying to do is get them to want to come back, to want to engage, saying, hey, these people have really figured out they are trying to make my life easier for them, and they're letting me do the job I am, paid to do, and not necessarily, wrangle with IT over items or the traditional things, right, where my work is and how come it's taking so long, and gosh, how come is it a different experience every time I come here? So our approach has been, again, use a familiar approach. So I think, like I said before, everybody gets kind of like the shopping cart and basket metaphor. I think if you just talk to a few people, if you don't know, but I think most people can imagine the top 10 things that people ask for in their things. So people want a new computer, or they want a new laptop, or they want new software, or a new cell phone, or things. And if you go around to your various groups that support your IT operation, I bet they can probably at least rattle off 5. And you can sit there and say, okay, those are the 5, and every once in a while maybe you ask some probative questions to make sure that they're correct. But that's where I started. You sit and say, okay, we know people ask for these things. Let's get them up, get them on our storefront, make sure our customers know about them, and then I think you go out and you start asking your customers, well, what could you use? Because IT, we started mostly focused on IT things, but you start asking your customers, what would be convenient for you? And I have an example here, out of office. Right, I'm sure I'm not the only person that's ever left the office for a day off or a week of vacation. Darn, I forgot to put out my my extended absence on my phone or on my email. Well, wouldn't that be a great service to offer? Wouldn't it be great if I could just call the service desk, or better yet, log on to the storefront just and say, hey, I forgot to put my out of office. Could you take care of this for me? And somebody would, and like, wow, okay, so not only just a provider of goods and services, but now, frankly, you're kind of just really helping people out. And making, like you kind of thought a little bit deeper about what their needs may be, rather than just simply providing them with a widget or a typical technical service. And another thing is try and keep refresh what you're doing here. It's not a stagnant storefront. I think you'll find that some of your assumptions you may have oversimplified. So I'll give you true confessions here. We had order a keyboard, but we didn't have wireless keyboards in there. And so somebody would say, I want a keyboard, and in the notes they would put they would put, I want a wireless keyboard. And well, if somebody doesn't read that, bingo. Next thing you know, you're sending them a new keyboard with a wire or with a USB cord attached to it. So you know what? Okay, you learn from that. So okay, now you offer 2. So now we offer both wired and wireless keyboards, and you continue to do that, and you kind of go from, if you will, just a technology provider to more, okay, well, this is my shop, right? This is my storefront. How do I keep it refreshed and engaged and get my customers to come here and get them to keep coming back? And I think that's been our approach to winning them over, and over a period of time, we're starting to see more and more adoption, and that's been very helpful.
I think what you're talking about, and again, you can correct me if this is not what you did in your environment, but I think it has to be data-driven discovery of what is it that your customers, not just asking your customers, but what has been the traditional call volume that we've had in the environment, using that to identify the low-hanging fruit. That's a great place to start for what you might want to put up onto the storefront. But as you said, the continuous improvement is learning from your mistakes. I think another key thing that you have to do is connect this with change management so that as new services are being offered, you're able to say, okay, we now know that there's going to be something that we would like to add to the storefront. Maybe it's training before the service goes live. Then it's maybe requesting the service once the service is available. Being able to customize reports or whatever. We have this ability to connect the storefront, just like you would in a commercial enterprise. If you're going to launch a new product or service, you should be announcing it, it's coming soon, drawing interest and having features available when that service goes live. So I think connecting it there as well would be meaningful for the customers to see it evolve like that.
Absolutely agree, 110%. The other thing is don't be afraid to steal ideas from other places. I mean, I recently bought a
Borrow.
Borrow. Thank you. Harvest, maybe. Yeah. So I recently bought a new Macintosh, and you look at kind of their stores. So they have offerings there, great service offerings. One-on-one time. Wouldn't that be a great catalog item, right? Hey, I'd like to schedule 30 minutes of one-on-one time with the tech, right? Or maybe group training. Hey, we at First American are about to roll out Microsoft Lync as a communication system, right? And so, hey, wouldn't it be great to have a group training sessions on Lync, right? And those would be great catalog items. So it could be just not a venue for items in personal conveniences, but also, frankly, for education. But I did digress, Julie. I'm sorry.
No, that's no problem. One of the things that I wanted to just make sure that we address, and this has been my experience as a consultant, that building a storefront that's user-friendly is very different than building a storefront that is IT savvy. And so you really have to know your customers as you go into designing this interface. Typically what will end up happening is that if an IT person designs this user interface, you'll get a lot of IT language in here, like, an end user might call an account, and IT might be talking about directory services, right? And so that's kind of night and day, the difference between the IT perspective and the end user facing perspective. And you would think, oh yeah, we know we need to put that in a customer context, but it's not that easy to do. Having gone through helping organizations to develop a service catalog, a lot of times they just don't really comprehend who their customer is. It's not as clear as you might think it should be. So developing an interface that is customer-facing can be very challenging. And so one of the things that we want to do is to create these high-level categories that are meaningful to the customers. So saying user accounts may not be the same thing as saying accounts and passwords to the customer, right? The password is a catchphrase that they're aware of and know and would want to click on that. Versus the word user, right? The user's not going to refer to themselves. So we have to pick the best high-level category structure that represents the types of services. It's like going to a car dealership and seeing, new vehicles, used vehicles. They've got it broken down into these categories that are meaningful to you as you go to look for a car online. So we want to make it user-friendly. But on top of that, what we also want to do, because we know the importance of documenting what we provision to our customers, if there is a way that we can link the front-facing storefront to our databases behind the scenes that allow us to know that a user has downloaded a version of this software and that we need to allocate a license to that user, that's capturing the information that we need to manage the infrastructure after the fact. So there's a couple things with that storefront that will make it easier for us to engage with the customers and also make it easier for us to track what our customers are doing and how they're using the services that we're providing. Why don't you talk a little bit, Mark, about that? You referenced it earlier, talking about the difficulty of mapping out the flow and being simple and being able to come up with this approach. Why don't you talk a little bit about your experience with mapping out that workflow?
Certainly. Well, obviously, one of the things you want to do is when you're building this, because what you are in the storefront, when a customer orders something, they have some sort of expectation of what and when they'll get the things that they need. So in order to do that successfully, you really have to map out the process. Just having if you will, a portal where people can order something and then you get, if you will, a generic ticket, and then it kind of is dependent upon, just, okay, I get the ticket, I do my things, and I pass it along to somebody else in a different department, they do their stuff, and from there I have no idea what happens, right? Doesn't really work, and it won't help you and your organization manage to your customer's your customer's need and expectations, if you will, your SLA. All right, so it's really important, I think, to get together with all the parties when you're going to say, okay, we're going to offer this service or this item on our service catalog, is to absolutely map out what it is that they do. And it's not just a matter of, flow charting and boxing it out. You have to make it a participatory process, because while it's hard to make things easy, and I really think you have to, the technicians that you'll be working with know an intimate detail about the technologies that they support, and that knowledge is important. You have to kind of somehow bring that forward and recognize it and bring it into a simplified format, right? So you have to, if you will, it's not just being simple, it's also being, if you will, kind of elegant. There has to be some thought behind it. But get them to come out and kind of collaborate in the process that you're developing. And then you kind of iterate through it, right? You go through it and go through it and go through it to make sure that everybody in the room agrees, okay, this is how we really do it. Because a lot of times you'll find it's the first time everybody's seeing the process from the beginning to the end, particularly obviously on the more complex ones. And then one of the things you'll want to do is figure out in those processes and in that delivery, one of the things you want to do is you want to be more transparent to our customer, right? And it's a traditional customer experience. They know, I think when you order a product sometimes you'll get know when it's built, right? When it ships, how it shipped, you can see it moving across the country or the planet. You want to kind of do the same, and then when it's going to be delivered to them, you want to kind of do the same thing. So there's, okay, hey, number one, we received your order. Got it. We have it. You want to say, okay, hey, your boss has approved it, because not everybody can just buy a PC. Sometimes you'll need to have your manager approve it. Got it. Okay, it's gone to fulfillment. So we're actually going to go out and buy your PC, right? And then maybe when it's configuring. So you kind of have those phases of delivery so people can see where their work is. So number one, you're communicating proactively to your customer, and number two, they don't have to call you and say, hey, where is my work, right? That I think is really important. And then also, that's kind of, I think, a good place to start when you start talking about really defining your operating level agreements. To come up with your service level agreement, that's a good time to have that talk, because now we see you have the whole process mapped out end to end. Well, how quickly can we deliver? Of what priority is this to your department? How does it compare with all the other work you have to do? Well, okay, we're looking at maybe about 20 minutes worth of labor, but I have an hour of other things I have to do. Another challenge you have to do is you don't want to get so in the weeds of the process, right? So I have here resist over-engineering and over-processing it. Again, what they do is very, very important, and I think what you as a leader or as a manager have to do is kind of extract that detailed importance and kind of get them to simplify how they do it. Don't get caught up in the weeds. And I think here I have don't complicate, simplicate. Complicate was a word I think I came up with. It's my one contribution, I think, to humanity, and maybe somebody else came up with it first, but I have yet to meet them. But when in engineering meetings, we would make things very, very complex. And so you got to kind of have to resist that sort of thing. Understand, for your customer, the easier you make it for them, the more they're going to come. Right, the more they're going to like it, they're going to get it, even though there's a lot of sophisticated things going on in the background. And then also, as a manager or leader in your organization, get behind services, self-services projects that will reduce operational complexity. And I think I have a couple examples here. There's a password reset. I mean, I don't know about you out there, but it's about 20% of all my calls. And that's a lot of calls, and it takes a lot of labor to help people reset their passwords. So if you can have a self-serve reset tool, think of how much labor you could get back, and then frankly how much labor you give back to the company, because rather than having people call in and have to wait for somebody to reset their password, they could simply do it themselves. Hosted virtual desktops, which is I think the politically correct way of saying virtual desktop infrastructure. Again, huge. If you can, get rid of, spinning disks and operating systems and installed software on everybody's desk and get it into certainly much fewer copies spinning on much fewer computers sitting inside a data center. That's a huge win for the business, because you've taken a lot of, if you will, the moving parts out of what it takes to do their daily operations, and you certainly made things more efficient and more effective in your own environment, because frankly you're just dealing with less to go wrong. And then obviously, you want to work through a good problem and incident management, an incident elimination process to find out, to get rid of that stuff that is a constant drain on the organization, but not so obvious. It's like not a large outage, but it is things that repeatedly go wrong, and it doesn't take much to solve it. Maybe a nickel's worth of labor, but because you do 50,000 of them a year, it adds up. So that's those are my thoughts anyway. Julie, what do you think?
Well, I was going to show everybody, and again, I'm going to invite, if you have questions, please post them now, because we're getting towards the end of the presentation, and I want to make sure we leave time for those questions. But what I wanted to show you guys, I'm not sure how familiar everyone is with the 2011 release of the ITIL framework. But the request fulfillment process did get a little bit of engineering to it, some slight modifications. And one of the things that we saw was this process flow that was developed. It's got a little bit more of kind of a comprehensive view around what it takes to process requests, receiving, verifying, getting valid users, fulfilling those requests, getting the correct authorization, within the different levels of management across the organization. But taking this, what I wanted to show all of you was just what Mark was talking about with this don't complicate, simplicate. This is a recent request fulfillment process that I helped map out for an organization, where one of the primary vehicles for the customers coming in was via the phone or via some self-service website. How would we manage combining what comes in through the phone and what comes in through the ticketing system? And we basically put together 5 process flows that very simply allowed us to show not just the use of the ticketing system, which in this case they referred to as the case management system, but also the way that the service desk, which was the single point of contact, that primary interface with the business, then turned around and interfaced with the different support partners, because it's not always just IT that we're dealing with here. A lot of these requests, like for downloading software or gaining access to something, are IT-specific requests. But don't forget that our customers are going to want to come to this website to do other things, like check on their leave balance or get a recent payroll statement. So some of these requests might actually tie into different business units outside of IT, and we have to kind of form those relationships with those business units to make certain that not only can the service desk be able to manage what can't go through that self-service portal, but what do we do with customers who don't have a successful experience up on the storefront? How do we interface with HR and payroll and finance, these groups that are behind the scenes that are doing more business processes? We're going to want a single way to track the different types of issues that customers may have and realize that these may be fulfillment issues that span outside of the IT realm. So this is available to you guys in the download, which is brand new in the BrightTalk interface. If you click on the attachment section, you can download our slide deck. And there you can look at these and you'll be able to see them in a little bit more detail. My goal wasn't to go through these, but to talk about how you can work together with the cross-functional groups, whether it's the IT with the service desk or a technical support partner or a business unit, work together towards establishing a simplified request fulfillment process that enables you to take the request models that you develop, that you put up onto your portal. It allows you to manage these holistically as a group, defining accountability, responsibility, closing the loop, helping to confirm that the customers are happy with the results prior to closing the request. And what do we do when the requests have to be escalated for one reason or another? Customers not satisfied, or they think they should have the software even though it's been denied. We have to have the ability to manage the requests in a process much like we do incident management. And it's easy to do that as long as we get the right people to the table that are committed to the success of making that storefront successful for our customers. So this is just, again, a couple slides here on a very brief request fulfillment process that I'm hoping will be helpful to you guys after the presentation. So we're going to wrap up. I'm going to kind of come back to Mark with this concept of incident elimination and ask him to provide just a little bit more detail. We're running out of time. We have about 4 minutes left, and I want to make sure we've got 2 questions waiting. But Mark,
sure.
Talk a little bit about what you mean by this incident elimination.
Well, I'll cut to the chase on this one, but basically, one of the ideas of self-service is not only just going to make it easier for your customer to get the items and services they need, but that also frees up labor. And when you free up that labor, I don't know about where everybody else works, but where I work, we're all 150% busy. So it's not like we don't have other things to do. So if you can take that effort and start concentrating on incidents, recursive incidents throughout your environment and in your job. My personal favorite is antivirus. I think it causes as many problems as it solves sometimes. Go off and tackle those. And again, your operation will just become stronger and more capable and less labor intensive. And Julie, if you'd like to get to the questions, I'd be more than happy to end it there.
I will also invite, before everybody drops off, to please click on the rating tab and make certain that you rate today's presentation. Our first question, I'm going to hand this one over to you, Mark. It says, how do you convince upper management to change the culture? Any examples of how you went about it?
Well, I think upper management, again, they experience the same thing our users do. And number one, they go off and they have IT retail experiences. And number two, they also call the service desk. And number three, they're interested in very effective operations. And number four, they're very interested in efficient operations. So really, if you put it together in that manner, I think they just kind of naturally come along. I think it's easy to get them, if you will, to champion for you. Sit there and say, hey, we're going to build a storefront. We're just going to make it easy to forget the things or to get the things that you need. And we'll get out of your way to help. And you guys can go off and, at least in our case, help close home sales and sell title insurance. So them becoming a champion for you is almost a natural fit. Everybody nowadays gets this. This isn't, brand new technology we're talking about. Everybody experiences it. So I think it's a pretty easy thing to get them, not just to sell them on it, frankly, but to get them to champion for you.
I think it really depends upon your maturity, right? If it's not something you've done yet, it may take some convincing. But this is where we get some real cost savings for the organization. And, boy, you want to talk about getting upper management's attention. When you can begin to reduce the cost per contact below what you pay for the phone, you begin to get some interest from that group. Our next question is, in regards to implementing a self-service Active Directory password reset option, how do you get around the potential of having anyone request a reset for an account that is not their own? Did you have some experiences with that, Mark?
In the previous company, we had deployed it. So could you repeat the question one more time, make sure I answer it correctly, or
sure.
Make sure I understand it?
It's with self-service with Active Directory, how do you get around the potential of having anyone request a reset for an account that is not their own?
Well, most of the systems out there do challenge and response, right? So when you go off, you have to set it up in advance, your password self-service capability, and you have to answer, typically 2 to 3 questions, just like you do with your bank. Like, well, hey, what was your father's birth year? What was the name of your favorite pet? What was your first car? Things that would be personal to you. And then those are stored, and then when you forget your password, you have an option to typically when you Control-Alt-Delete, there'll be an option to reset your password, and then you answer those questions. So there's really, someone would have to, in order to do that, someone would have to know an awful lot about you.
Yeah, it basically comes down to verifying identity, and it really depends on the policy that your organization has on how that happens, whether it's employee ID, last four of your social, or through what Mark is referring to as this exchange of submitting a question, submitting an answer so that you can be verified. But either way, you got to have some way to prevent the risks that can be exposed through these self-service tools. Well, that's about all we have time for today. It looks like we've been running for 45 minutes. I just want to thank Mark and very much appreciate your perspective on and your experience with building this storefront. And I'd like to thank all of you for attending today. And don't forget, you can download the presentation. And please, before you terminate today, could you please click on the ratings tab and make certain that you rank this presentation and provide us with some feedback. That would be very great.
And Julie, thank you, and for all of you out there, wherever you are, thank you as well. It was fun to do.
If you want to contact Mark, here's his contact information, Mark Galligan at firstam.com, and me, I'm J.L. Mohr at mindtheitgap.com. Thank you very much. Everybody have a wonderful afternoon.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.